Next up on the number one tee.
Well, hello and welcome back to your virtual tee time. My name is Tori, and today we have quite a treat for you. We have Jon Sherman, author of the best-selling book, The 4 Foundations of Golf, back with us. He was on an earlier episode, I believe it was episode number 3, where we talk about the 7 habits to become a better golfer, and that is actually one of our most listened episodes, Jon. So if you haven't listened to it yet, be sure to check it out. How are you, Jon? Thanks for being back with us.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back on. I'm fresh off my first Scotland golf trip, so feeling good about that. But it's nice to be on the show again.
I want to dive right into your Scotland trip, actually. So tell us about it. Where did you play? And, what'd you think about it?
It's something I've been wanting to do for, 20 years. So it was really important for me to go over there, play the old course, and just see where the game started. A lot of the courses I play where I live on Long Island, were built, over 100 years ago and thatched of the courses there. So I wanted to see, the real thing. And I have a Twitter actually helped me out a bunch. Just mentioning that I was going over there, I had all these Scottish people helping me out. So I got to play some amazing courses. I played Carnoustie and the old course twice each. Played Muirfield. Played a course called North Berwick, Gullin, number 2, Hanmuir, Dunbar, and I'm forgetting the last one. I can't believe it, but it was just, it was like a really life-altering experience. I'm going to have to go back there every year. I really, really loved it.
I was there this past September, and I was at Carnoustie too. I out of the same courses you did, I did North Berwick, Carnoustie. And I think that's it, actually, from the list that you just gave. I think Carnoustie is the hardest course I've ever played.
I got a chance to play Shinnecock the first time last year. I know I'm name dropping here.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. I love it.
I got on with my same friend Evan who arranged this trip. And I would say those two, maybe along with Bethpage Black, are the ultimate tests of golf. Carnoustie is like unrelenting. It's I spent some time in the bunkers, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We were playing a match against one of Scotland's best amateur players for the last 20 years. He's still a +6, and another guy was a +4. It was me and my buddy. We got some strokes, thankfully, which was nice. And just kind of like messed around and shot 5 under and 4 under. I was like, okay, we're not on the same page here.
Yeah, we're not in Kansas anymore.
But yeah, it was, Carnoustie is incredible. I would love to play it like 50 more times.
Yeah.
It was that great.
Tell us about your experience on the old course. How did you get on? Did you have to be in the ballot? What was it like?
That was the most terrifying thing, because I didn't know for sure. Beforehand, again, some Scottish people on Twitter were like, I can get you on the ballot. I didn't have a guaranteed tee time. I was there. So we had a couple of local friends put me on the ballot with them, which is really hard. Like it's harder than ever to get on the old course, because obviously golf is thriving and everyone wants to play there. It's, top 3 or 4 most sought after courses in the world that you can play publicly. So you have to go on this ballot, and the first ballot we got was at 5:50 p.m. So sunsets at like 9:30. So I'm like, all right, we'll have to take it. I don't know if we'll finish or not. And it was just it was actually overwhelming being out there. I got a little emotional. I didn't fully cry or anything, but it was just very emotional being out there. And to be honest, it was almost overwhelming and confusing. There's a lot of people in the beginning. There's holes all next to each other. The first few holes, I was kind of jarred. I wasn't even playing golf. I just couldn't believe I was out there. And then I kind of settled into it. And we finished in the dark. So I made a par on the road hole 17 in total darkness. I hit my drive with no idea where it went. And we found it in the left middle of the fairway. I hit it, had no idea where it went. I'm like, that felt good. It was on the green, and I 2-putted. And I parred the 18th as well in total darkness. So it was really special. And then we got to play it again last night. It was my last round there. Again, at 4:30, so later in the day, but we finished. And it was just, I think it was the most interesting, nuanced, confusing golf course I've ever played. You would have to play it over 100 times. I was speaking to people there just to understand what's really going on. There's just so many bunkers. The wind changes everything. it's kind of like this big mystery or something. If I'm not being too melodramatic, but it was truly like life altering getting to play it.
So it was like a mystery, the course in itself, with all the history on top of it. It makes it for quite an experience, I can imagine.
Yeah, it was amazing. We're hoping to maybe do we're talking about maybe doing like a practical golf trip there next summer. Now that I know some people who can be experts, it would be a lot of, I want to find a way to go back there every year. Yeah. It was amazing.
Well, how was Muirfield?
So Muirfield was, so I think Carnoustie, Muirfield, and Old Course around like that upper level. Obviously, they're in the open rota. Mm-hmm. And Muirfield, I played awesome at. Unfortunately, I missed the 4-footer on 18. That would have been for 3 under. So I played really well. I felt it was also a very special experience just being out. We got to play the course where it was pretty much empty at the end of the day. And it was sunny out, which was nice. They always get sun in Scotland. And I, again, just totally fell in love with the course, instant, top 5, top 10 golf courses I've ever played. A good mix, I think, between the Old Course and Carnoustie, because it wasn't as hard as Carnoustie. Granted, the rough wasn't up. I know the rough can get crazy there, but I thought it was an interesting mix between the two, because it was a little more straightforward in front of you, some blind shots, but just again, if I'm playing the first 6 holes, I'm these might be some of the best golf holes I've ever played in my life.
Yeah.
And I got to play with a golfer who was, he's a teaching pro now. He was playing the Open Championship a bunch of times. So I got to play with a really good player, and he kind of he's very stoic Scottish guy. On the 14th green after I made a birdie, he's like, I really like your putting routine. And it was one of those moments where you're I bet this guy doesn't dole out a lot of compliments. And to me, I was just I almost fell over. I'm oh God, that was amazing. So it was really nice. I got to play with a lot of locals, and the Scottish people are incredible. So yeah, Muirfield was special too, obviously.
Let's say you're going to go back next year, summer 2024. What will you do differently? Is there one thing that you'll do differently?
Well, I think I have to go. Also, I remember the course. I forgot. I also played Royal Aberdeen.
Okay.
A listener of our podcast, The Sweet Spot, hosted me there. He was awesome. So I played Royal Aberdeen as well. I think next step is going north to Dornoch and all those courses. Mm-hmm. So there's other parts of the country to explore. But what I found there was their second and third tier courses. For example, I played a course called Dunbar. If you plopped Dunbar on the coast of North America, people would lose their minds over it. Yeah. It was like Pebble Beach of Scotland. And in East Lothian, where Muirfield is, and other courses, it's just kind of another course.
Yeah.
So there's just their second, and my buddy's club, Panmure, again, not a highly sought after club there. The locals know it's very good, but Americans don't. One of the best courses I've ever played in my life. Ben Hogan said their par 4-6 hole was the best par 4 he's ever played. And I think I agree with him. So even the second and third tier of courses there are incredible. So I feel I have a lifetime ahead of me of going over there and seeking out the different regions and all the courses. So I'm excited about it.
Well, I appreciate that comment, because actually I'm in the process of planning our Scotland 2024 trip. And
awesome.
And the guy that's helping us, said that Dunbar is exactly an amazing golf course that, doesn't have the big name, so people don't go to it as much. But he said it's amazing.
Obviously, you want to play the Old Course and the Open Rota courses, mm-hmm. but that's what I'd be interested in, tours or people doing these excursions, the other courses. And you can get on them, because Scottish golfing culture is a little bit different here. They will allow, you'll pay a little extra, and that's how they subsidize their memberships there. They don't pay nearly as much as we do for our private clubs. So you can make yourself a nice trip there. And I would say don't sleep on these courses you've never heard of, because Dunbar was a perfect example. We were playing it, and we were just every hole we were oh my God, look at this.
Yeah. That's incredible. So this is kind of leaking into what we're going to start talking about soon, but was there a round that you weren't in Scotland that you weren't playing so well at? Your game wasn't there, and you started to get frustrated, and you had to kind of dig deep to stay present and enjoy the moment rather than getting all into your golf game.
So I was playing the first 4 days. I played 36 holes walking.
Oh boy.
I played 10 rounds in 6 days.
It's quite the whirlwind.
Yeah, it was worth it though. I had to fit as much golf as possible. But the fourth day in the morning was that I told you about at Carnoustie. So I was like still like minorly jet lagged. I played 36 3 days in a row, and now I'm going the hardest golf courses in the world in a match against like he's actually still the 1100th ranked amateur in the world. So I was looking forward to it. It's going to be fun, but I think around the 8th or 9th hole, I got like my body felt fine, but I just got tired. Like I wasn't like achy. I was just like, oh, I go to my buddy Evan, who was my teammate and my host. I'm like, dude, I'm hitting a wall here. I'm going to be honest with you. Like I'm really struggling. But I didn't want to like lose the moment of enjoying Carnoustie. Yeah. I knew I was going to play it again, but I'm like, I don't know how many times I'm going to play this course in my life. So I had to set aside I wasn't driving it well. I had played really well the prior 3 days. The last round before that was when I shot 200 at Muirfield. So I was playing well, but then I got to Carnoustie. I went in a few bunkers, had to pitch out. I actually took a few bunkers. It took me 2 tries to get out of.
Oh, that's always fun.
Yeah. So that was fun. So yeah, there was a moment there where I had to be like, okay, calm down. Like we're playing this match, but like I had to just calm the competitive side of me and say like, this is still a fun experience. I'm incredibly tired, but let's put that all aside and like absorb this experience at the same time. So yeah, that round was a little bit of a challenge, and thankfully I took a nap after that. And then we played the old course that night, which totally like ended the day perfectly. So yeah, I think there was like a 3 or 4 hole lull at Carnoustie where I was like, oh God, I need to buckle it up here.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So let's get into, Jon is the author of The 4 Foundations of Golf. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the cover right here. One of my favorite golf books. And it actually, Jon, when did it come out?
It came out in June of 2022. So almost 11 months ago.
And you quickly made a 4 Foundations masterclass shortly after, which has just come out to the public.
I realized people wanted the information in different formats. So when it first came out in last summer, people were like, where's the audiobook? I don't read books. I'm like, oh yeah. I was like, I'd prefer people to read it, but I'm like, all right. So I did the audiobook, which is horrible listening to myself read it.
Yeah. Wait, tell me about that experience, actually. Sorry to interrupt, but just curious.
I sat in my office where I'm at right now for a full summer reading the book, working with an audio engineer, and then like to listen to the book. And everyone hates their own voice. I hate mine. And so I listened to it like 4 or 5 times over. I really, and you know, I do podcasting. I think my fear of my own voice is that I can be monotone at times. And in person, I'm very like extroverted, but sometimes like when I read, I'm not like exclaiming things and like, I'm not a voice actor. So it was very uncomfortable trying to like add color to the book. So anyway, I got that finished. It seems to have gone well. People like the audiobook. And then other people were asking me like, well, I think video would be better for these concepts. So also went through a horribly uncomfortable process of, I don't like putting my face out there much. I don't know why. So I hired like a video production company, and it was 2 really difficult days. My wife, I have to give her credit for getting me through it, but I didn't sleep much. I actually had a horrible cold, so I had to like take aspirin between takes to like clear up my congestion. It was, I think it came out great, but it was a lot of work, also with the editing and making sure the visuals went well. So yeah, I think it was just another way to give. A lot of people ask me to coach them directly, and I just can't do that. Like I don't have this time. I felt was like the video course is a way for me. Like if you put me in a room with someone and ask me to explain golf to them in like 3 or 4 hours, afterwards they're like, oh, I kind of get it now. Like that's what I tried to do. It's like have a conversation with someone one-on-one and explain golf to them. Whereas the book, the audiobook's 10 hours and the book takes a while to read. So I figured whether someone read the book and wants the concepts reinforced, or they don't want to read the book, like here's kind of like me explaining it to you versus you reading it, because that's like a more passive way to learn it, I think. So that was the goal with the video course. And it's been a month and I've gotten some positive reviews, so people seem to like it so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am one that has read the book, and I did your first module on your class, or the master class too. And I have to say, it is beautifully done. There's no reason to feel self-conscious about the video. I mean, you explain things perfectly, and the editing that goes along with it makes it flow really nicely. So it keeps your attention. So I understand that those 2 days you said were really tough. I get it, but it was work well done. And, and now it's done. You have this beautiful product to put out to the world. So
when you do something like that, you just kind of have to accept the short-term horribleness and how hard it is. And then it's kind of done forever. And then you can kind of, same with the book, like writing the book took me 3 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, once it's done, it's mostly done. So I'm glad to be done with it.
Yeah. So a couple of questions, because I'm always interested in the back end of especially digital products. How long did it take you, since you've already written the book? I imagine that putting the content together didn't take that long, or how was planning the content for the course?
I think the hardest thing was I going to put every single thing from the book in the video course? And the answer to that was I did not. Yeah. I left certain chapters out that I thought would be like kind of superfluous to the video course. And then I also put some bonus materials in the video course that are not in the book, like stuff from other coaches, practice games. And then there were some opportunities like in the strategy section to do screen shares. So for example, in the book, I explained how to play certain holes, but in the course, I did screen shares of me on like Google Earth showing it. So I could get a little bit more interactive. So it took like a month and a half. I worked with the company that like kind of took the book and turned it into a bunch of slides. And then we went through them and we agreed like, okay, this is what you're presenting on this part. And then I kind of had my quote unquote scripts. So on the day of it, I had the camera, a teleprompter, and I ended up not really using the teleprompter.
Yeah. I
just kind of took each concept and riffed a bit on it. And then they had to edit me down, hopefully. So it wasn't easy because I thought there's just way too, like I wanted to make sure it was shorter than the book in terms of time invested.
Yeah.
So there were some hard decisions on like, can I explain this in a short period of time, or are there just certain things I'm going to have to leave out? So yeah, there was about a month or two of like deciding on that before I kind of decided on the actual script of the course.
Again, all the information on how to get a hold of this course is in the show notes. Just to give everyone a backstage pass here, there's 6 modules that you go through, and then there's 6 additional bonuses too. And, when I snuck into the bonus section and I saw that you did a bit with Lou Stagner, it was fun to see you guys both on video at the same time. I appreciated that. I wanted to dive into module 1 so everyone can get an idea of what the course is like, what kind of topics you cover, and then we can explain what the other 5 modules are, just so that, if this course is for you, which I believe it's for every single listener listening, they kind of see what they're going to get and that. So,
well, let me preface this by everything I try and do online. I'm just going to bring it up on the side so I have my cues here and make sure I remember all the modules because they're different from the chapters of the book. I love to give away stuff for free, so you don't have to buy my course. I think it'll help your golf game, and I'm happy to give you a free preview of some things now. Whether you follow me on Twitter or listen to my podcast, like I try to give away a lot for free. And then if you want more, you can buy something from me. But I don't want to make this a long sales pitch for the course. I appreciate you highlighting it, but let's give your listeners some good information for free here, and then they can decide.
Oh, no, absolutely. That was the plan. And actually, I know that most of my listeners are not on Twitter. Maybe they go on occasionally, so but they don't. Well, yeah, exactly. So if you're on Twitter, then I'm guessing you already follow Jon. But again, we have that contact information in the show notes. But know that you are mostly new to the listener, other than the episode that you did prior. And again, everything that we're going over is, I know, will be amazing information regardless. So let's get into it. So we have module number 1, which I thought was the expectations kind of management foundation, or laying the groundwork for that. Is that true?
If I have one piece of feedback from the book, now that's been out almost a year, like what has really changed people's relationship with golf and their enjoyment level, it's the first section of the book, which is expectation management. And that is the first module of the course as well. Because I think if you can't understand these concepts, you don't have the opportunity to become a better strategic player, a better practicer, better at mental game, or enjoying it, or lowering your scores. So I always I mentioned that's kind of like the foundation of the foundations, because that's what the house is built on, healthy expectations in anything, not just golf. So yeah, that's why I start with it. And I feel like just that module alone is enough to give you the right building blocks to approach golf from the right perspective.
And Jon, do you mind telling the story of playing with your dad in Florida and what that round was like, and what you were going, how your relationship with golf was at that time, just so we can get an idea of how the four foundations were formed to begin with?
Well, I should go back a little bit. As a junior golfer, I was good. I wasn't great. Maybe I was a 3 or 4 handicap at best. I was the captain of a mediocre high school golf team and walked onto a Division III golf team at NYU, where my coach was forced to make me play in a tournament once. I actually came in second place. It was the only college tournament I ever played. I have a trophy still there with my name on it for second place. But that was the end of my junior competitive career. So I got to a point where I was good enough to shoot in the 70s, not all the time, but when I got into my 20s and wasn't practicing or playing much, I was living in New York City. Any opportunity I got to play golf was kind of like this make or break proposition, where I was going to go out and shoot the score I wanted to, which was I don't know, a 75 or 76. And when I felt that slipping away, I would lose my mind. Horrible temper, a jerk to probably be around. I'm ashamed of a minute, but that's how I try to teach people through this experience. And it got to a point where the absolute low of it was I was in Florida with my dad, and my dad was a beginner golfer at that point, taking up the game. And we were playing in Florida on a family trip, and same round as it always went, some bad shots, some good shots, and kind of muddling around. And I hit a good drive on one hole, and I thought to myself, all right, you got to hit a good approach shot here. There was water on the right, and I just blocked the 8 irons 30 yards to the right. And as I watched it sail, I'm something in my brain just exploded. And I feel ashamed to say it, but I think it's an important story. I just threw the golf club at the golf cart, and it severed my driver right below the head, and it was flying up in the air, and it impaled itself on the fairway. And my father looked at me and just walked off the course. And I have a really good relationship with my father. We talk every day. He's my mentor. And yeah, he's scolded me, screamed at me in my childhood, but I never saw him do that. It was one of those I'm just so disappointed in you moments. And he just stormed off the course and didn't even say a word. And I knew at that point, I'm this is rock bottom. You are a scoring addict, whatever the metaphor is. Mm-hmm. And you need to stop this. You need to accept that you don't play much, you don't practice much, you're not entitled to that expectation. And at that point, I just decided you're going to go out and have fun when you play. And that's kind of how I made peace with golf in my 20s. And then, when I became a father, moved out of the city, and I had more time to practice and play, then I could change my expectations of the game. But, that experience just jolted me so hard that it forced me to reevaluate what I wanted from the game. And I use that in the course and in the book to ask people to reevaluate their own games. What's your happiness equation? What do you want out of this game? What are you willing to put in? And if those two things aren't aligned, then you're going to have a tough time in this game, just like I did.
And actually, I didn't realize your dad was a beginner at that time. And that just adds a whole nother element to this story, because he's I
don't want to play this game. This is horrible.
We all, us golfers that have been around a while, we all understand you throwing your 8 iron towards the cart and being furious at your game. We can all understand. We've all been there. So knowing that he was a beginner, he probably didn't understand that whatsoever. So that's an interesting take.
Yeah, it was a bad moment with I think a good outcome in the long run.
Yeah. So one of the first lessons in this module is called incremental progress. And this is probably my favorite lesson in this module, because I think it's so important. It's so simple, but it's so important to explain. So will you dive into that lesson?
Yeah. So I think in general, not all golfers, but a lot fall into a trap that everything they embark on is, I call it an all or nothing proposition. So let's say, for example, like, we have the classic slicer of the golf ball, and they're looking for help to eliminate or fix the slice. So like, that's what the golf industry will sell you. It's like, oh, you go on YouTube, you're going to see a million videos, like fix your slice forever.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that sets up golfers for this expectation that if you have this problem in your game, you can make it go away forever. But that's not the truth. Like, at some point, you're going to hopefully figure out a way to make that slice happen less often and bring it back into what I call functional territory. Like, that's the goal of golf, in my opinion. It's going to keep happening from time to time, just like I hook it still from time to time. That was the thing that I fought for my game for a long time. So I love incremental progress because it doesn't put so much pressure on you that you have to make this go away overnight or even in a matter of months. It's, I can chip away at this and realize that I'm going to have some breakthrough moments that feel good, and then I'm going to have some setbacks. So over time, like, you see that, like, it's kind of like the stock market. It goes up and down, but over the long term, over the 100-year trend, it's going up.
Yep.
And that's so hard for golfers to, in the moment, whether it's in the round or in a matter of weeks, it's so hard for people to have that perspective. So I try to, again, when I'm talking about managing expectations at the beginning of this course in my book or anything else I do, I want to lay that groundwork because it applies to everything. You want to get better at strategy, and I teach you the rules on how to pick better targets. You're not going to do it all the time. You're still going to screw up. And that's why I tell people, if you do it 30% more often, you're going to get better. And don't expect to like just flip a switch and do it 100% all the time, because that's where you get frustrated when you give up. So I think the idea of incremental progress in golf and elsewhere, like James Clear is 1% better every day. Like, I'm not the only person to have this concept, but it's like patience of just understanding that if you are trying to get better at something, like, it's not this like binary on or off thing. It's like this messy gray area in between.
Is there, just from personal experience, I actually hook the ball too, so I can relate to that. That will creep up from time to time. Anything in your short game that creeps up from time to time that you have to put back in check?
It's a disaster.
Like, what is the biggest? Like, is it you struggle most with putting, bunker, greenside bunkers? What is it?
My tee game and putting were the two part. I always was a good iron player, but when I wanted to like compete, get the scratching better, like keep going higher and higher, I had to conquer my driver and my putter, and I got way better at them. They're like straights now. My wedge game, unfortunately, what works for me in my iron play, I'm a big de-lofter. I used to be a bit shallow. I'm not as shallow anymore, but what works for me in my iron play, that compression and de-lofting and low launch type stuff, works against me in my wedge play. So I kind of have a wedge game. I would say 40 to 80 yards, I'm really good. But you put me like greenside bunker play and like kind of testy, tight lie type shots, especially in tournaments. If I'm being like honest with my game, like that's where I still have some gains to be made. I definitely got exposed in Scotland a few times in their bunkers.
Yeah.
So yeah, with that, like I have to be patient with that too. Like I know what to do. Like I know how to play bunker shots. You put me on a short game facility, I could do all of them. But like under the gun, I'm still, for whatever reason, like it doesn't come as natural to me as where the rest of the game, I'm just kind of doing it. I'm not thinking. Mm-hmm. Whereas, wedge play, it's like I'm going to be thinking more mechanically because I'm more comfortable. So there's some stuff to be done there. It's a problem I still need to work on. And just trying to be honest with myself about it. Like if I skull or chunk a wedge shot in a tournament, like the other day I was in the tournament and I pretty much a great round going and totally messed it up because of a bunker. It was unfortunately because I was coming from Scotland back to the US and the sand changed on me and I hadn't practiced and I wasn't prepared, if I'm being honest. And my bunker play did me in. And I kind of have to accept that that's like one of these parts of my game that I haven't put the work in as much. So I have to accept like, the outcomes are going to be a little bit more a wider range, if I'm putting it like nicely.
Yeah.
My greenside wedges, like they could use some work for sure.
I have to digress for 1 second because as we're talking about bunkers, I'm thinking about the odds of Corey Connors and Victor Hovland hitting the exact same club in the exact same bunker and having almost the exact same outcome this past weekend at the PGA Championship.
Yeah, and to Hovland's credit, like he used to be like dreadful out of bunkers. He's gotten a lot better. Like he really worked on his short game. It looks pretty tidy now.
Oh yeah, no, and I would say he probably got up and down from greenside bunkers 9 out of 10 times, or a lot. Every time I saw him in a greenside bunker, he was getting up and down. But that was quite the championship this weekend with Michael Block and all that. Did you enjoy watching it?
I did. I didn't get to watch a lot of it. I did see the hole-in-one. I actually had YouTube TV on my phone. I was like about to get in the car and I saw it. I was like, oh, wow. That was
Incredible.
Really special. I saw Brooks, his interview on Saturday night, and I'm like, this guy ain't losing.
Yeah.
Like he just like he's just too confident. Like whatever he figured out, like I think this is over. I'm not a good predictor, but that time I got it right.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. I really like that course. I'm hoping a friend of mine won around there in August or September for rounds. So I might make it's a 7-hour drive for me, but I might try and play it at the end of the summer.
So I'm born and raised in Rochester, New York. And
you are?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I used to be a member of Oak Hill. And my parents still are. So I'm not sure when I'm going to make it there this summer, but it
looks incredible. Like the renovation looks phenomenal.
It's gorgeous. It's my most favorite golf courses because there's 2 of them there to be on. It's quite something. So speaking of PGA Tour players, let's get into your second lesson, which is the 2/3 rule and the PGA Tour fallacy. What does that mean as far as when you're trying to manage your expectations?
So the 2/3 rule is actually a blog post I wrote in 2016 when I first started my site, Practical Golf. And it was like a concept that really resonated early with people, so it kind of hung around. So long story short, I believe if you take golf and divide it into 3 phases: tee shots, approach shots, and finesse shots. So anything inside 100 yards, wedge or putter. My belief is that in my own eyes, and certainly not on the PGA Tour, I've never seen a golfer like fire on all cylinders. So they get 3 out of 3 parts of their game above average. My belief is that you can shoot your best scores where 2 out of 3 of those things are working very well. So for example, you were driving it great and you had really great wedge and putter play, but your irons were like, they were okay. Mm-hmm. Or you had great iron play and great driver play, and your putter, you kind of putted a few times. Like you could still put up a good score relative to your game. So it eliminates this belief that everything needs to go right in order to shoot your best or even average scores. Because a lot of golfers, like they're on this very short mental leash, myself included for a long time, that if they go out there and they're driving it not well, they kind of get very discouraged and they're like, I'm not hitting it like I was on the range, and they kind of give up on everything. So that's like the basis of the 2/3 rule, is that you only need 2 out of 3 things to go pretty well for you to shoot a good score. And really, I think the key to golf is 1 out of 3 days, eliminating zeros or making them happen less often, is that having the, mental fortitude and grit, words I use in the mental section. When 2 things feel uncomfortable and you're like, okay, I'm still going to figure out a way to score and stay engaged in this round. Like that is where you make the big strides in your handicap, in my opinion. So that framework, I think, has helped a lot of golfers because it gives them more patience. It removes the expectation of perfection, because it's just so ridiculous. I see 15 handicaps going out expecting like everything to go great and hitting great shots. And like, go follow a pro around when they shoot 78 and miss the cut. Like they're hitting a lot of crap shots for their skill level. So no one's doing it. So the 2/3 rule is really about wrapping your head around what good golf looks like. And more importantly, having a little bit of like resolve to stick with things when something's uncomfortable, because something will be uncomfortable every day you play.
Yeah.
It's just going to happen.
Well, and
so that's the 2/3 rule.
We've all had those rounds too, where full swing working great, drivers working well, irons are working well, and we just can't make a putt. Or
it happens. I had my best round ever last year, and I don't really think I drove it all that great, to be honest with you. I didn't. Like I was clanking it around. I just kept it in play, and my iron play and putter were just on fire. So we talked about watching the PGA Championship. I think most golfers, or avid golfers, love watching tour players. And unfortunately, what that does is that mismanages your expectations, because golf on TV is for entertainment, right? They've got a ton of balls in the air at any point. They could choose to show what they want. It's not technically live. So they can run around and like, show that 25 footer dropping, show that wedge landing next to the pin, show that 340 yard drive. So the producers are tasked with giving us a version of golf that's entertaining. Would you want to watch someone missing the cut every week shooting a 78? Because if you look on the bottom of the PGA Tour, LPGA Tour, I guarantee you, if you look at the bottom of every leaderboard, every week there's a top 500 golfer in the world shooting in the high 70s. Mm-hmm. Would you want to watch them do that? Not really.
No.
So we're being shown a version of the game on TV that's not technically real. We're being shown the best golfers in the world who are the hottest at the moment. And on top of that, the highlight reel of all their best shots. And then as we get to the weekend, we're really honing in on the guys and the girls that are. So I think it kind of trains us to think like, oh, good golf is hitting these great drives and these wedge shots next to the pin and draining a bunch of 30 footers. I know it did that to me when I was a teenager and even like a 12-year-old watching golf on TV. You just can't help but not be like brainwashed a little bit by it. So in that section of the course, I try and share some statistics on like proximity from the hole, the amount of birdies they're making, just bring it back to life to show that like, yes, these are the best golfers in the world, but what you're being shown is not a realistic version of even their game. Like they're so good. I mean, that guy I played with in Scotland, who after the round is talking about other pro players who he can't match, like they're gods to him. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, dude, I can't even like fathom your game. Yeah. So there's always somebody better, and they are as good as you can imagine they are, but they're not that good. Yeah. Like they don't have the ability to land wedge shots 8 feet from the hole all the time from 100 yards. They're more 18 to 20 feet. Yeah. So what does a normal golfer do? They hit a wedge to 30 feet away on a par 4. They got a 30-foot putt for birdie, and they get angry at themselves. Or they two putt from 20 feet, and they're like, oh, I should have made that. Mm-hmm. So there's all these outcomes on the course that are good outcomes for most golfers. But I think watching tour golf on TV raised the bar so high for them that it kind of brainwashed them into thinking these aren't good outcomes. And when you don't have the proper feedback and you think a good shot is a bad shot, that bleeds into everything else for the rest of the round. It just puts your mind in a where you can't the resolve and the patience to play golf, because we're out there for a long time. And if you're doing that to yourself, you're being hard on yourself for shots that are good, like you have less of an opportunity to score well and have a good time.
And it still ties into that notion of having the grit out on the golf course. So if your expectations are all getting mishandled and you're not meeting them the way that you think you should be, then that grit just gets lessened and lessened and lessened to the point where you're just saying, fuck it. And you don't want to, you're not even trying anymore out there on the golf course.
That's why I say it is genuinely all connected. Like you want to have a sharp mental game, like your expectations need to be in line.
Yeah.
Because if you don't get that part right, then again, you start losing your temper and your patience. And those are two things that like, don't go well with like good golf.
No, not at all.
Like they just don't.
Okay, let's get into the next lesson, which is practice and play. So I get this question all the time, which is how much do you play and how much do you practice per week? So what do you think the magic formula is?
It really depends on the golfer and like their stage. A lot of it deals with like their life. So one of the things I try and do in one lesson is I talk about practice versus play. So my belief is that I don't like any extreme in golf. So I don't like the golfer who plays all the time and never practices. And I don't like the golfer who's a range rat who doesn't play as much. Mm-hmm. So you need to find a balance. Obviously, people have careers, they have family obligations. Like you can't do it all.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of golfers feel like with practice, like I show up to the range 3 times a week for an hour, I get this on the golf course, and it doesn't work that way, unfortunately. I think there's a tremendous amount of learning that goes on the golf course. You know this, you play at a high level. Play, in a way, is practice. Like you need to be out there being uncomfortable, being distracted by your playing partners, feeling the pressure of making that 5-footer, the first tee jitters, And then after your rounds, absorbing all that feedback and saying, what was making me uncomfortable? I'm going to work on that in practice next time. Or, man, I was way too aggressive with my targets. I need to like really reevaluate where I'm aiming. So there's all these things that happen when you play that you can learn from. And I would prefer most golfers to, I always say, if you can't play enough, then you have to put a ceiling on your expectations. So like if there was a golfer who told me like, I can practice all the time and I can only play once a month, I'd say that's great. But unless you're some type of like athletics freak or just like are uniquely suited for this game, like I don't think you're going to get as good as you could be if you were someone who could play twice a week and not practice as much.
Yeah.
So as best you can, there needs to be a balance. And if you can't achieve that balance, if you're someone who only plays once a month, you know, that's a tough ask to really say like, oh, you're going to lower your handicap a ton. I'm not saying you can't do it, but I like there to be like a good balance between preparation and then testing. And then in between, you're taking the feedback from the testing, which is playing, and using that feedback to make the preparation even better. So it's like this big feedback loop.
Yeah.
And the best way you can do that is balance. Like I can't play at the level. I probably play between 50 to 80 rounds a year. And I'm not a range rat, but you know, I can hit balls at home. I'm like hitting balls for at least 5 or 10 minutes every day to keep things in check. I'm at a different stage in my golf life than most people probably. I think if I only played 20 times a year, there's no chance I would be as good as I can be right now.
Yeah.
I need to be out there playing.
I love that loop though. Preparation, test, feedback, preparation, test, feedback.
Yeah, it's a loop. It needs to like all be working together. And again, like everyone's different. And if you can't do that, then just maybe you're the type of golfer who's just go out there and try and have fun and don't be so hard on yourself with scoring expectation.
Exactly. So out of those 50 to 80 rounds a year, what percentage are more of a test, more tournament level, or even you're betting with your buddies where there's stress, where there's...
I would say 90% of them. I love to... So I would divide it like actual tournament rounds. So I have a really great opportunity in New York Metro to play a ton of amateur events and some pro events too. Last year I played a ton. So I would say upwards of 30 to 40% of my rounds, including like club championship stuff, could be like stroke play. Like this is like a real tournament type deal. I like doing it. This year I'm actually taking a step back a little bit just because I'm a little bit busy with what's going on.
Yeah, your business is booming. It's just that
I'm trying
season.
to get more balance. If I'm playing with friends at my club or someone else's club, like we're playing a match, like it matters.
Yeah.
Like, so I like that. I enjoy competing a lot. It's fun for me. And then some rounds are just kind of like, oh, you know, I'm just out here just kind of, I try and be consistent though in the way I approach the game. I give every shot the attention it deserves. That's not hard for me to do. It's like this routine that I just kind of go into. And there are very few rounds a year where I'm just kind of like, meh, I don't care what's going on here. But that's like the level of golf I want to be at. Like that's my version of fun for me.
Exactly.
So yeah, a lot of my rounds like really mean something.
How important? So we have a player that wants to get better. They want to score lower scores. They want to reduce their handicap index. How important would you say it is for them to put themselves in tournament situations, in tournament round situations? I
don't think tournament golf's for everyone. I think there's an intermediate level you can do. I would say whatever makes you uncomfortable. So for some people, that's playing with a stranger at their course.
Yeah.
For she jitters or actually betting with a friend, like having a $10 Nassau. That makes a lot of people really uncomfortable. So I would say if you want to get better at golf, you need to make yourself uncomfortable and you need to make that 4-footer count. You need to not take that mulligan off the first tee. If you really want to get better at this game, like you need to put that type of pressure on yourself. Would I tell everyone to go on a stroke play event? No, that can be absolutely the worst thing for some people and ruin their enjoyment of the game because you know this, like you're on an island. Yeah. And when things go wrong, like it can really bring you down. Yeah. And it can make you like question things about golf and even yourself as a human being, which is kind of sad, but like, you know what that feels like where you put a stinker up there in a tournament and like everyone does it. So I don't think stroke play events are for everyone. In fact, I'd advise most golfers against it. But I would say there is a middle ground where you can say like, I'm going to make these rounds count. Every shot counts. Where like some golfers go out there and they're picking up the ball and everything's a gimme.
Mm-hmm.
Like you got to put some pressure on yourself and make it count more. And if that's competing against your buddies, whatever that is that makes you uncomfortable and you want to get better, like get more uncomfortable. Like that's how I got better. I just made myself incredibly uncomfortable in front of a lot of people over the years.
Yeah. And I'd argue too that right now that something that makes you uncomfortable is just playing with a stranger or different tee boxes or a new course. But maybe one day those things aren't uncomfortable anymore and you are looking at more of a stroke play tournament to make you uncomfortable.
Yeah,
like it's all a journey.
Yes. If you get to that level where like your handicap's dropping, you're counting every shot, your putts matter, and you're disciplined in your approach and you want to take it to the next level, then yeah, I think a stroke play event could be, if you have the right attitude, then like, yeah, that is where you get to like now that I've played, I don't know, 150 stroke play rounds over the last 8 or 10 years in some like big tournaments, me going in front of a bunch of strangers now and like in Scotland, I played with some people who like, I listened to my podcast and read my book, which is strange to me, but like, I'm like in their head, they probably have some idea of who I am. And I'm just like some guy. But because I've been under all that pressure, like I think the old me would have been like, oh God, this is like terrifying. Whereas like nothing can happen that's worse than happened to me, like in tournaments. Like, I've had some blow-ups and like, you just can't embarrass me more than I've been embarrassed. So like, I'm okay with anything now.
Oh my God. Isn't
so
that the
ultimate,
truth?
like yield.
Yeah. No, I've had a similar year.
It happened to me the other day. Like I told you, I was cruising along in this tournament and for a few seconds I lost focus and just made an absolute mess out of a routine bunker shot. And I looked like my playing partners are waiting there like, finish up the hole, dude, come on. And I know it's happened to them too. And it's just what we go through. Like if you're going to put yourself in the arena and put your knee to the test like that, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It happened to Tiger. I always say Tiger made a 10 at the 12th hole at Augusta. It happened to him. Granted, he didn't birdie like 5 out of the next 6 holes, but he made a complete fool out of himself in front of everyone. And he just went on into the next hole like it didn't even happen.
Exactly.
So if it can happen to him, it can happen to the rest of us.
Okay, next up. So accepting, and this is also a hot topic, accepting the range of scores. Everyone goes out and they have their best round ever. We've all had our best round ever. And I'm sure after that best round ever, you go back to the golf course the next round and think, well, obviously that's going to happen again. So let's talk about range of scores.
Yeah, I literally just tweeted something out like that yesterday or the day before about that, just saying like shooting like your best score or close to it is like very bittersweet because you think like, oh, this is my new level of golf. And really what it is like a 1% probability event. And
oh my God, that's the perfect word, bittersweet. Like, that was nice. So long.
And then you're like, oh, this is the new me. And like, it's not like maybe it reveals some of your potential, but then like, you're like, oh, now I'm the golfer who shoots in the 70s. Like you're not like, you would need to do that like 10 or 20 times before it's like a thing.
Totally.
So I think that's one of the hardest things that I struggled with for years. And even pros do. Like you hear these post-round interviews at the pro who shoots a 64 and then the next day they shoot like a 75 when they're out of the tournament and they miss the cut or something like that. And they're just like dumbfounded. They're like, I don't know what happened in 18 hours between like 2 golfers showed up. So it's relative to every skill level. And of course, as for the beginner and intermediate players, like their range of scores are much wider than a pro's. Like if you look at a pro during a typical like season, their best score could be in the low to mid 60s. And, maybe if they had a total stinker on a tough course, they're going to shoot like an 80 or an 81. Mm-hmm. So their range of scores are like obviously tighter, but it's there. And then if you look at the 5 or 10 handicap, I think those are the most tortured golfers because like the 5 handicap is stuck between 2 worlds. Mm-hmm. They can shoot around par sometimes, so they can reach the mountains and say, wow, I just shot like a 73 or a 74, but they also can shoot that 90 or 93.
Yeah.
So they're like exposed to these 2 different worlds. And I was caught in that world for a while. And I think that was one of the reasons golf drove me so mad. I forget who said it, but someone said like the low mid single digit handicap is one of the most tortured golfers on the planet.
I would agree, actually.
Stuck between those 2 worlds.
Yeah.
So every golfer needs to accept that no matter how good you get at this game, there is this Jekyll and Hyde side to you where one day everything feels comfortable and the next day it feels like a total mess. I mean, that can happen in the span of 3 holes. So I try and give context to that in the course, just showing like what PGA Tour players are doing or even what I'm doing in my game. I shot a 64 last year, and then a month later, I shot an 86 in a tournament. Like the wheels just totally came off. Like I was releasing my book and my mind wasn't there. All the tricks I had to stay in it just fell apart. And I just it was a meltdown for me.
Yeah.
I tried as hard as I could, but it was just a disaster. And that's relative to my game, of course. I know a lot of golfers would be happy with an 86. So no matter how good you get at this game, like there's this wide window we need to accept. And don't get too high on yourself. It's kind of like the NFL. Like you're never as good as they always say like you're never as good as your last game or bad, because like the NFL is a perfect example. Like teams can be one week to the next, like totally different. And that's like that in golf. You just have to accept that like it's a very volatile, variable game. And that's very hard to accept.
And I also want to add, like, while you have your best round ever and you don't want to get, too up on yourself for that. Also, when you have one of your worst rounds you've had in a while, that doesn't define you either. That is also an outlier, The
truth somewhere in the middle. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what I try and do is I think I'm better at now shrugging off the stinkers and just being like, you know what? That was a 1% event too.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let that bring me down and having, as Ted Lasso said, be a goldfish, right?
Exactly.
You have to have a short memory, mostly with the stinkers too. And when the good things happen, like, it's not that I don't want you. I want you to internalize that success. I want you to be proud of what you did. I want you to frame that scorecard and remember it, because that was a wonderful moment for you. But at the same time, we can't go overboard either.
Yeah.
It's dealing with these extremes. I think it's much harder to deal with the higher round, because let's face it, shooting your best score ever is fun. Like shooting your worst score is like, you're looking into the abyss, and then you're on YouTube looking for swing tips for the next 5 hours.
Or buying new clubs, maybe a new putter or a driver.
Yeah, all the things that golfers do or are told to do when things aren't going. And sometimes it's just time, right? Yeah. You just need to be patient and let it pass. Sometimes you don't need to intervene. Like that's the hardest part about this game is like, when do I intervene and when do I just kind of let it happen?
Exactly. That's a good point. Yeah. So getting into the last lesson is called scoring in a nutshell. And this is where you start to dive into strokes gained and how Mark Brody, that's his name, right? Is it doctor?
Yes.
Is he a doctor?
No, he's not. He's not a doctor.
Okay.
He's just Mark Brody. To my knowledge,
just Mark.
I've never heard him. He's a professor at Columbia University. I played some golf with him. He's a wonderful man. I think he's one of the most influential people in the history of golf. He would never admit to that because he's so humble, but he is.
And he literally invented strokes gained.
Yeah. So he figured out a way to be more prescriptive in where scoring occurs and how golfers separate from one another. So when I was taking up the game, it was, the conventional advice was, keep it in play, safe off the tee. And like, you're going to score with your wedges and putter because, you take 38 putts around. That's 50% of your strokes. And that's 50% of the game. But, what they didn't allow for is the nuance of, does an 8-inch putt have as much influence over your score over a drive or an iron shot? And the answer is like, not even close. Because what's the worst thing that could happen on the 8-inch putt? You're going to make it 99.9% of the time.
Yeah.
What's the worst thing that could happen on a drive? You can blow 2 OB in the bunker. You're losing strokes in a hurry. So every shot is the same. They count the same on an absolute level, but in relative terms, they all have different importance. And that's what Mark and every shot counts, which I consider required reading for every golfer to understand. Strokes gained, when you talk about it, sometimes it's confusing to players, but when you really just like absorb the lesson of it, that yes, putting and wedge play is still important, but it's not as important as we thought. And like, if you want to reach your best level of golf, you need to be able to hit your driver well off the tee. And when I say well, I mean keeping it in play and hitting it a reasonably far distance. You don't have to hit it 300. If you're an adult male, 230, 240 is pretty good. If you're a female, over 200 is pretty good. You don't need to have prodigious length, but you need to keep it in play too.
Yeah.
And fall in love with your driver. And iron play. That's where you're a good iron player. The world is your oyster in golf. You're a great putter. I mean, I think you're going to score well, but I need to know more about the rest of your game because you can be making a lot of putts for bogey and double.
Okay, so this is kind of where my block is on this because, again, you go into how golfers separate themselves. And it is believed with you and with what Mark Brody says is that the long game is the most influential.
Correct. So his analysis yields that drive and approach play. So outside of 100 yards, you could say that explains about 2/3 of scoring differential between any golfer of any level. I mean, the research, like the stats are there, like it holds up. That's not to say there aren't outliers, meaning like I want every golfer to track their stroke scheme, and you can use a system like Arcos or Shot Scope and find out the truth in your game. So Tori, you might find that you are a above average driver and iron player, but you are losing strokes to similar golfers or better golfers with your putter. So for you, it might make sense to work on your putter. But the truth is for most golfers, like you want to get to a 20 to a 10 handicap, you want to make big strides. My main rallying call is that I think for most players, generically speaking, you can get quick wins with your putter and wedges. There's usually some stuff to be cleaned up there with 3-putting, goals and chunks around the green. And my advice is like, clean that up. That's an easier problem to solve, but you will reach your limit. You can't putt your way to a 5 handicap or chip your way from a 20 handicap. Eventually you're going to run up against a wall and you're going to need to hit your irons better and your driver better. And that's just like a truth of the game that is impossible to avoid, because if you're hitting it OB all the time, you're chunking your irons and missing greens all the time and putting yourself in bad spots, you just can't score. Like you could do everything you want with your wedges and putter. Like you're still going to be getting up and down for double or triple. Yeah,
that makes sense as far as when you say, okay, clean up your wedges and your putting. 3 putts is a waste, you know,
yes.
And it's much, again, I think where the block is with me is that it's just so much easier to clean up your putting and clean up your chipping.
It is. Absolutely.
So for someone that's shooting in the 90s, high 80s, it's like, okay, wait, look at that first, because you can take, 3, 5, 7 strokes off your game just by
potentially.
that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. The questions are different for each golfer. And I would tell anyone like the best way to find out for yourself is just track it. Like it's not hard to do anymore. There's apps, there's things. So like if you're serious about getting better at golf, like track your stroke steam, like everyone can find out quickly. And then find out the truth for your game. But yeah, if you want to reach your highest level, eventually you're going to need to put the work in on your irons and driver. Yeah. It's unavoidable. You cannot ignore them is my point.
And your stance is build your game. You build your practice plan, we'll just say that, build your practice plan so that you're hitting more greens. Like you think the more greens, the better. That
is the only traditional statistic that is a great predictor of scoring. Like you tell me if someone's hitting 50% of their greens around, like I'm pretty sure they're under a 5 handicap.
Yeah.
It just makes the game so much easier. What I mean by building your game around hitting more greens is I think some type of like functional driver technique where you're keeping it in play. You're not inflicting. You could shoot yourself in the foot so badly off the tee. Like the quote from Mark's book, which I don't even think was his, is like, if you can't drive it, you can't score. Because the golfer who just sprays it all over the place and is going through their bag for more balls, like it's just too many strokes gone. Like you're playing in desert golf, like where you live, like you're hitting it in the desert, you can't score.
She gone.
Yeah, it's gone. Yeah. So, I would say like, again, every golfer has different answers, but the basics of like keeping it in play off the tee and hitting like a few more greens per round and having like that strategic discipline to being like, I'm going to be conservative in my approach shots and just get it on the green or near it. Like you will peel back a big layer of scoring. Whereas I think with wedge play and putting, like putting is so hard that like you can never tell a 15 handicap that they're going to be like draining a ton of putts. Like we could clean up the 3 putting where they're not doing it as much, but they're not all of a sudden going to be draining a bunch of 12 and 15 footers. Like my point is like putting is so hard that you reach a level where it's like you have incremental gains if you keep putting your practice time there. And I believe the same is with wedges too. Whereas if you clean those up and you get it where they're not killing you, then you can move on to the iron and driver and clean that up a bit. And that's where like the big gains are.
Yeah.
So I think that's like, I'm not ignoring wedges and putter. Like you need to be functional with them. But the game becomes much, much harder if you can't keep it in play off the tee and you're just chunking and sculling your irons. Like it's just too hard to score for those circumstances.
Well, Jon, again, and tell the listeners, this is just module 1. And we just kind of touched on it. Like I took all my notes of things I wanted to cover, but this is just module 1 of the 4 Foundations masterclass. And there's 5 other modules. And it is a beautifully done digital course that's easy to use. So if the word digital course doesn't you're like, what is that? Trust me, it is, there's no guesswork. The system works with you. So, you finish a lesson, it goes on to the next lesson. It is very easy. And it is a great way to absorb the information from the book on a much quicker level. And I can't recommend it enough. So, Jon, thanks for being on today.
Well, that is very flattering. Thank you for saying that.
And I can't leave you without asking what's your goal this summer? I know you're coming out of the winter. The clubs are dusted off. They're ready to be used this summer. What's your goal?
I'm not a big goal setter. Like I finally won my club championship last year and I wasn't even like, oh, I got to win this thing. Like I just kind of let it happen. So I feel like, I put myself, I'm going to play 7 or 8 more. I mean, I would love to get into the US Mid-Am. I've been really close the last 2 years coming down the stretch and missed it by a stroke or 2. I would love to make it into the US Mid-Am, but I got 1 chance at it. So, we got to hope that I got my game in a good enough spot where like on that one day I'll be good enough. So yeah, I mean, I love to, we have a good match play event along on an amateur. I'd love to get deep into that, but yeah, we'll see what happens. Like I still measure my game as what's fun for me. I want to continue having fun. Like Scotland was fun for me. Like I want to do stuff like that and I want to compete. So I'm trying not to be a psychopath competitor is what I'm trying to tell you. I want to do well. I really do. But at the same time, like when I press too hard is when I don't play well. So I want to just kind of do what I know how to do and what I can teach other golfers and I'm using it myself. Like that's kind of like my thing is that everything I teach other people I'm trying to have the discipline to do myself and we'll see what happens.
Well, thanks for your honesty there. Coming from another, psychopathic competitor.
Yeah, it's hard.
I could get that way.
Quiet that that numbers, like I always loved numbers growing up. Like it's that's why I love golf. It got me into it, but at the same time, like I can't let it come too much.
Well, Jon, thanks again for everyone that is interested in the masterclass, the book, or getting in touch with Jon. Again, he's mostly on Twitter. All the contact information and links is in the show note. Jon, thanks again for coming on. It's not going to be the last time. We're going to have you back on again, but I appreciate your time.